Greetings, friends. It's helpful for us to reflect on wilderness journeys in our own spiritual lives, where we echo Jesus' 40 days of praying and fasting in the wilderness, and also the Israelites' journey from captivity in Egypt to the freedom and wandering of the wilderness. Richard Raw wrote about this. In the book of Exodus, Egypt is the place of slavery, and the promised land is the place of freedom. The journey from Egypt to the promised land is a saga which symbolizes our own struggle towards ever greater inner freedom, empowered by grace. The story of Israel symbolically describes the experience of our own liberation by God and towards a universal love. We have to be willing to experience the Exodus in our own lives and enter into our own desert wanderings. We have to let God liberate us from captivity to freedom, from Egypt to Canaan, not fully knowing how to cross the desert between the two. That's key, not fully knowing how to cross the desert between the two. There are times in our lives when we feel stuck or lost and unsure of how to navigate the terrain we are in. In our spiritual journeys, there are times where we really don't know what we believe or what our calling is. We might be between one season and the next, but we don't quite know what that is, and we're in this lostness of in-betweenness. We might not know how to find our way to God. At times we don't even know who God is, or even if there is a God. And these times of questioning are so important, but they can leave us feeling barren or panicky, and we become desperate for clarity or for spiritual guidance or sustenance. And it's easy to feel alienated or abandoned by God in these times, when wandering through these desert terrains. But as Raw pointed out, these times of not knowing and lostness in the desert wilderness are important times, especially in a deepening contemplative journey. Wandering through the spiritual wilderness can reveal to us just how inept we are at navigating wilderness. In fact, we need to come to this realization of our ineptness, because this is where trust is forged at a deeper level. It is in this lostness that we lose our illusions about ourself and God. And so the point of times of wandering in the wilderness is to get thoroughly lost. I love how David White puts this. How do you know that you're on your path? Because it disappears, that's how you know. How do you know that you're really doing something radical? Because you can't see where you're going. Everything you have lent on for your identity has gone. And so you are going to enter the black contemplative splendors of self-doubt. So well put, the black contemplative splendors of self-doubt. When we get so thoroughly lost that we cannot possibly forge ahead, this is when we're ready to drop into a deeper dimension of ourselves and God. Of course, when we encounter these times, we try to map our course. We try to stay strong and resolute and re-find our firm footing. But inevitably, we come across that in ourself which flails and fails again and again. We're tempted, as Jesus was, to fix, feed, and hurry things along. And we long for the known ways, even the known life of being enslaved, as the Israelites did. By noticing what we're hankering for, we can recognize those areas where we've been enslaved, the places that need to learn a new freedom from an old identity. At some point, we're asked to let go of our conceptual maps and other props and simply allow ourselves to be where we are in the wilderness, letting it do its work on us. Lisa Rankau wrote, "The spiritual evolution necessary to move from a consciousness of bondage to a consciousness of liberation takes time. The people who emerged from the wilderness were not the ones who entered it. Wilderness times are painful and difficult, and most of us want to get out of them as quickly as we can. Yet to shortchange the process is to pry open a cocoon prematurely because we want the butterfly." She goes on, "The question is not what we need in order to get out of this wilderness, but rather, what do we need to inhabit this wilderness for as long as it takes to complete our transition, our metamorphosis? You see, the wilderness is a season, not a location. And like the healing of wounds or the becoming of a butterfly, the wilderness journey is a process, not an event." Part of this process of wilderness is to bring us face to face with our frailty. We try so hard to not be the struggling, resisting, clinging humans that we are, but ultimately the invitation is to see through our attempts to control and improve on our humanity, and allow ourselves to fall into grace as we are. In that recognition, there's the discovery of a vaster space in which we live and move and have our being, the space of grace. The discomfort and lostness of wilderness reveals the vastness, freedom, and wholeness of wilderness. There's nothing to do but be here in the presence who guides us at a much deeper level than the obvious. The lostness of wilderness is the transformation of our souls through the gift of despair, through the blessing of being poor in spirit, because in that is revealed the freedom of the kingdom of heaven. As Jesus said, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." Again, to quote Lisa Rankau, wildernesses are crucibles where we become the people who can live into new lands of promise and liberation. Ultimately, wilderness invites us into expansiveness, to discover the vastness of the terrain we are already in, to feel into the heart that has no boundaries. The mind struggles with this expansiveness, mistaking it for lostness. So it grasps for clarity, meaning, and certainty about God, life itself. But we are never so lost as when we're certain, because certainty can mean that we're encapsulated, enslaved in a space that is too small and limiting, ideas that are too small. They may have served us for a while, but ultimately we have to move beyond all conceptualizations. The apparent lostness of wilderness is inviting us to know who we are as free from any enslavement. In this freedom, we know that wherever we are found. The promise in Matthew 28 verse 20 is, "Surely I am with you always." This presence is symbolized in the Exodus story by the pillar of fire and cloud that accompanied the Israelites. This presence is always here, so we are always home, found, no matter how lost we feel. No matter whether what is here in our experience is as scorching as fire or as nebulous as a cloud. So lost and found are really meaningless here. And the invitation is to let go of our certainty, our props, our requirements of the moment, so that we can taste our freedom in the wilderness of God. We discover that who we are, in essence, is as vast and uncharted as wilderness, one with and at home in the vastness of God. The invitation of wilderness is to open ourselves to whatever landscape we are in, simply surrendering to this presence, who's promised to be with us wherever, however we are.